Okay, so we are in Italy, somewhere probably 60, 70 miles outside of Venice, near Noale, where of course Aprilias are designed. And if you look over there, we've got a RS 660, we've got a Tuono 660 in the middle, or something covered up, and that's what I'm here to ride. And it's kind of cool. I'm one of the only 3 people in the world to get to ride this thing at this level. So we're going to uncover it and show you what we're working with. Probably the tire will give you a little bit of hint of what's going on, but it's still secret. And so at lunchtime, they covered up my bike. Look at that. There it is. The Tuareg 660 Aprilia. So this is a pre-production bike, so it is it's an early bike, but it'll look pretty much like this. So I get a chance to ride it early before the press launch, before production bikes, just to kind of get an idea of what this thing's going to be like. And we spent the morning riding it, and I'll have to say they've done a really good job right from the get-go. There's still a lot of stuff that needs to be sorted out in terms of electronics and a few things working and all the final specs, but overall this is what the Tuareg is going to look like. So as you can see, it's got 21-inch front tire, so that hints at its dirt capabilities right off the get-go. And the back is an 18, spoked wheels, not cast. There's only one version, and this is it. So powering it is the same basic 660 parallel twin that is amazing in the Tuono and the RS 660, but it's been tuned differently for this bike. So first things first is the architecture of the frame was able to make where the tank sits and the airbox. The airbox is way up here on this bike. It's underneath this cover behind the fuel filler, and that gives it a very long intake funnel, which gives it quite a bit more torque. Torque comes in lower, and it has more torque. So 70 Newton meters versus 67 Newton meters. I haven't done the math yet. I'm jet lagged, but I will put it down. We'll do the math and put it down there somewhere below so you can see right here. 80 horsepower versus 100 horsepower for these two guys, but this is a much more torqueier version of those two motors. So a lot of interesting stuff. So instead of a twin spar aluminum frame like you see on these two bikes, you've got a steel trailless frame. And they did that specifically to keep the weight down and also to be able to tune the chassis for adventure riding. So you're looking at a one-piece frame, welded subframe. But what's interesting is this bike has 6 mounting points for the frame versus 2 over there and 3 over there. So each one is basically tuned for their own chassis, but you've got some plates here that hold the motor, and then all throughout you've got six anchoring points for this motor versus the 2 and 3, which is really cool. Motor internals, everything's basically the same except for the valve train to make more torque and be more applicable to this motor. So we're talking different valve lift, different cam timing, and that's about it. So other than that, it's very much the very similar engine, which is cool because it's a great motor and we love it in both of these guys. So we're gonna get on the road and I'm gonna talk about the bike while we're riding it, but I'm gonna fire this thing up so you can hear it, and then we'll go from there. So you're gonna see a lot of lights on right now, and that's because they're still working on the electronics. So ride modes, there's multiple ride modes, there's 4 of them. So let's go from the top. They have Explorer, they've got Urban, they've got Off-Road, and they're going to have an individual setting. So right now the bike I'm riding only has the Explorer setting in it. So when I'm doing this, it really doesn't change anything except for when I go to off-road, get the off-road ABS. But other than that, the gas light's going to be on because they haven't got that thing sorted out yet in terms of this test bike. So a lot of early stuff. So, you're going to see some lights on and stuff. But other than that, it's good to go. So let's fire this thing up and see what it sounds like. Which is going to sound real similar to things you've already heard, right? So nice high exhaust. They've moved the exhaust, the catalyzer way up front here, close to the motor, make it get hotter sooner, smaller, hotter, rather than sitting back further and having a larger catalyzer. Smart move, keeps the weight down, and that's one really cool part about this bike is the weight. So 187 kilos dry. They didn't give me a wet weight yet, which is like 413 pounds dry, which is pretty wild. But it has 18-liter tank, so it's like 4.5 gallons. So I think once you fill it up and you get all the fluids in and stuff, you're going to be sitting right in the 455 range, which puts it in line with the KTM and the Yamaha, obviously. Really cool setup about this bike too is the ergonomics. So I'm going to talk about that with the riding, but I just want you to look at how low the seat height is on this bike. So it's 850 millimeters, and they've really worked on keeping it kind of low, but not low as in this is the number that's most important. The most important number to them, they said, was from foot to foot as you go over the top of the bike. That's the number they really worked on. So you're basically your inseam. So if you look from behind, the seat's really narrow. The whole bike's narrow, but the seat's really narrow, and that makes it feel even lower seat height than it actually is. So, and they did a lot of work underneath, and we'll get the GoPro under there later, but there's a big scooped out area underneath the subframe and the fender for the wheel to go up in, because they kept, or I should say they've got 240 millimeters of travel front and rear, which is right in line with all the other more dirt worthy and more aggressive adventure bikes. So KYB unit front and rear, piggyback shock with linkage, fully adjustable for preload. Preload knob is right there. Preload, rebound, compression. Up front you've got fork preload, rebound, and compression. KYB units, super killer. And look how thin this thing is. It's crazy. So what we haven't shown you up front yet is the front of this bike. Super cool. So they wanted it to evoke memories of the Tuareg from 89, right? They wanted it to kind of have that Aprilia DNA, that look of the Tuareg, to kind of be reminiscent, and it kind of does. It's got kind of a wide front, but then when you get to the back, it's narrow. So it's kind of does both. It's got a lot of wind protection. It's got a nice big screen, but you got a lot of wind protection, and you still get the narrowness. So let's go for a ride. I'm going to be following these guys back to the factory. We'll talk about it the whole time. So let's go. We're riding with one of the designers, or I should say, one of the project leads of this bike, and we are riding with one of the PR guys, and we are riding with the head of testing for this bike. So he's on that camouflaged unit up there that you know, we had to be very careful leaving the factory today not to get spotted by the paparazzi, right? So here we are behind the bars of Tuareg. So the one thing that it really strikes me with this bike from the get-go is how narrow the bike is. So it's perfect for standing up and being able to move around the bike. You can see there's this line where the tank is big and it's kind of roundish, almost like the old Tuareg, you know, or Africa Twin, or those 90s, those late 80s, early 90s Dakar bikes, right? It's got that shape when you're sitting behind it, but then you have this line and they're super narrow. You look down at my knees there's tons of room, and when you're standing up, you can get over the front of the bike so easy, and there's nothing in your way. You don't have to splay your knees out at all. It's very, very narrow, which I'm really pumped on. So you've got a 5.1 inch TFT display. This is the display that's on the RSV4 and the Tuono, rather than the smaller display that's less, you know, that's the display that's on the RS and the Tuono 660. This gets a full TFT display that's you know, super bright, super easy to read. It's got a little sun visor to keep the sun off, which is really smart of them. Even though they say you can read it any light, backlit or whatever, this right here is a really smart design choice, just because you can actually it shades it. It's really cool. LED headlights, LED turn signals. US turn signals are obviously going to be bigger than these little guys that are up front here, but you know, it's still going to be LED. Motor wise, we're going to get out on some more open roads here in a minute. We did a little gravel, a tiny bit of gravel earlier, and didn't have the chance to. Yeah, it gets off the line pretty decent. Woo-hoo. Getting roosted by the testing boss, man. Anyway, we did a little gravel for some photos and stuff, but this is a extremely limited ride. We've only done maybe 70 kilometers, so whatever that is, that's like 40 miles, and we're going to do another probably 50, so it's going to be like a 70-mile ride total, which getting the chance to ride something that's not production and before the settings are finished says a lot about how important this bike is to Aprilia, because they know, especially in the US market, adventure bikes are killing it, and they want to make sure that they get the best exposure possible, and it's really cool for them to invite us to come ride this thing before all the settings are done, which it's really cool, but it also makes it difficult for us to pass complete judgment on this bike, right? Because some of the suspension settings may change. They don't have all the ride modes set up now, so we don't know like what the throttle response is going to be in urban. We don't know what the throttle response is going to be like in off-road. We only have the Explorer, which the throttle response in Explorer is good. It's really nice. It's very controllable. It's torquey. It's more torquey than obviously than the RS and the RS 660 and the Tuono 660, but it's still maybe not as torquey as I would like it to be, but it's a rever at the same time. So you do get some really good performance, revy type performance out of it, whereas you get more torque. So you lose some of the top end horsepower from the 100 horsepower that's on the two sportier bikes, but you got some torque down below. Throttle response is awesome. So the wind protection on it's pretty good. I'm wearing a Climb Cryos helmet right now with a beak, and I would say at highway speeds you get a little bit of buffeting off of that front windscreen, but it's like a high frequency buffeting that's not like a thump that's going to drive you insane. You just kind of notice that you're getting a little bit of you know, vibration from your setup. So but I'm gonna pop off here and wait till we get to some little quicker roads and check back in. Oh, let's talk about standard features before I do that, since we're just cruising down the road. We got cruise control, standard on this bike, which is cool. I haven't played with it yet. When we get back on the big roads, I'm going to try that out and see if it works on this bike or not. It's got a quick shifter, and it has a optional auto blip downshifter. So anyway, the seat is, I'd say, dang comfortable. The seating position is really nice. You sit down in the bike rather than up on top, which is nice. You feel like you're in the bike for street bike riding, for the twisty roads and all the mountain roads where you're not in the dirt. You're sitting down, and the bike handles really well. Head out to the dirt, you can stand up easily on it. It's really nice. Some very interesting design choices, like the gas cap. The gas cap is just a little tiny plastic gas cap. It doesn't have a flip, you know, or a aircraft style setup. It's just got a normal gas cap, twist off gas cap. And the reason they did that is to keep the weight down. You know, they said that it saved like 300 grams, which is, I don't know, a quarter of a pound. You know, and you're like, so what? I'd rather have, you know, that fancy gas cap rather than a quarter pound. Yeah, but quarter pound here, quarter pound there, quarter pound there. Pretty soon you end up with a very light adventure bike. And this is what they were going for. when we were sitting in the meeting room talking about the bike, you know, they basically said, here's the bike, ask any questions you want. They didn't have a presentation ready, and they didn't want to. They wanted me to ask them about the bike. So you know, I asked them, you know, why this style, like what's the concept behind this bike? And they said that they wanted a very capable enduro bike. So enduro in Europe means adventure bike or dual sport bike, right? So very capable enduro that kind of splits the line between the Tuareg 700 and the KTM 890, and I think they've done it really well. This thing definitely, you know, has a motor that's more like the Tuareg 700. It's very light, it's very nimble, it's very movable, but I think the suspension is a little more up spec, and it's not as rough around the edges, we'll say, as a KTM can be, right? And it's not sharp and pointy. It does have some nostalgic kind of style to it, which is cool. It's got some oomph, you know. The boss man here he's pretty fun to ride with. He gets it. He's been cutting skids all day on that test bike. So he's riding a test mule, so it's got all kinds of crazy sensors on it. It's got potentiometers on it. It's got stuff to measure freaking suspension travel and movement and all that kind of good stuff. It looks like it's seen some hard miles for sure. But it's used to figure out all these settings that are not yet solidified on this bike. So we are riding back at the design center. And I gotta say, amazing start to this bike. I'm excited to see when all the other stuff works. But overall, excellent bike. We'll pull in. I'm gonna give you some final numbers and thoughts on the bike, and then leave it at that. So just remember, this is not a full test ride, because we're not able to do a full test ride on this bike until October, when we get the press bikes. So anyway, low seat height, super easy to get on and off. I love it. Nice and narrow, super killer. So there it is. Let's take one good look at it. I think it looks cool. That's the kind of the heritage colorway. It's gonna be 3 colorways. This one, a black and red, and I think more like aggressive kind of racing livery looking one that is a normal Aprilia colors, right? So let's take one more look at that front end. One thing I forgot to mention, headlights. So it's got daytime running light running right there, and there it is. And the headlights are automatic sensors, so they'll turn on and off depending on whether it's light or dark out, which is kind of cool. So overall thoughts, this is a pre-production bike, so not everything was finished, but even then they did a really nice job on this bike. I think it slots exactly where they aimed it to be, right in between the Tuareg and the 790. It's light, it's nimble, it's excellent on the road. It's pretty fun on the gravel dirt roads that we rode. We didn't get through a whole lot. We really just shot some photos and that was it. So I slid it around for some photos and that was it. It's got all the tech that you would find in some of the bigger bikes, and it's got a price point that is of a smaller bike. So like I said, this is coming in at $11,500 to $12,000 in the US. They haven't set a price exactly on it, but it's going to fall somewhere around there, and you're going to see it in Q1 of 2022, which means somewhere between January and March. So overall, man, good job Aprilia, pumped on it. Overall, super killer bike. I think if I had to really lay down some criticisms, number one, the air ducts for the radiators kind of blow onto your knees and they pull around your legs. It was a hot day today. It was probably 85-90 degrees and humid, so I'm definitely cognizant of some heat up on your legs, and the back end of this bike still doesn't look completely finished, but we don't know, maybe there's going to be some different colorways in the rear end. But it looks like they worked really hard in the front and kind of got to the back and said, okay, we're kind of done with it. So but with bags that might change the look, we don't know. So overall, good job Aprilia. Killer motor, cool chassis, it's lightweight, handles excellent on the street, and I can't wait to actually pound on this thing in the dirt. So stay tuned.